Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interest, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This Honourable Senate now resumes its sittings. Statements by ministers.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following Ministry Papers numbers 102 to 105 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues for the days October 1, 8, 16 of 2018 and 22nd and 29th of 2018. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Urban Development Corporation for the year 2013-14.
Sir President, is there a list of the announcements? We're not seeing it. Yeah, but could I just borrow the list to see what are the announcements?
Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the Senate, motions for leave to introduce bills, the presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained, public business.
Mr. President, today is intended to take the further amendments to the Road Traffic Bill 2018, and with your leave, I'll proceed with that at this time.
Before you proceed, I noticed that Senator Scott Motley is absent and Senator Floyd Morris is sitting in the seat of Leader of Opposition Business, Dr. Floyd Morris. Just remind him the old St. Mary adage that one day Busher is still a Busher, Senator Morrison.
I'm sure he appreciates the reminder, Mr. President. Mr. President, the amendments that we will consider today were tabled in the chamber 2 weeks ago. And as we will all recall, the Road Traffic Bill 2018, which seeks to ensure better order and enforcement of order on our roads so that we can protect all our road users, was passed in this honourable by this Honourable Parliament on the 11th of May, in this Honourable Chamber on the 11th of May 2018 with 161 amendments. The other place agreed to the Senate amendments on the 30th of October 2018 and then passed 6 further amendments on November 13th, 2018. Today we're here to consider them. Mr. President, I take this opportunity to remind my colleagues and the public of the importance of this bill. Earlier this week, or it was late last week, it was reported that the number of road fatalities for 2018 has already surpassed the 322 fatalities recorded for 2017. In fact, there were 44 deaths on our roads in November 2018 alone. And the projected death toll for 2018, if we continue at this rate, is 371. 371 lives, Mr. President. Little children who haven't lived out their potential, young people at the start of their lives, seniors deprived of the peace of their latter years, families deprived of mothers and fathers. And for what? For somebody to say they're the wickedest driver. For somebody to pick up one more car load in a day. For somebody to reach an appointment 10 minutes earlier. Or to make up time because they woke up late. Mr. President, we have to act now as too many lives are being lost to wanton road terror, if I may use the words of the director of the Road Safety Unit. Wanton road terror due to bad driving practices. And the simple truth, Mr. President, is that these bad practices have been continued because of the failure of the legislative framework to provide for an enforcement mechanism to make undisciplined road users accountable for their actions. At some point, we have to take hold of this culture of indiscipline in Jamaica. We need to recognize that the undisciplined drivers, the bad drivers, if they're never called to answer for their wrongs, if we do not fix the system from one that allows them to hide from the law or slip between the cracks or suffer a penalty or a fine so light that it doesn't even matter to them, for them to feel a sense of impunity that they throw the tickets out of the window because they know they will never be brought to book, and that if they are, it doesn't matter. Imagine the mindset of that driver who racked up the 700 tickets. Imagine how he felt after the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20, 30 tickets. When he got away with them, imagine how he felt each time that he was bigger than the law, and how he can in fact make a joke of the law, that the system means nothing to him. I call on this Honourable Senate, Mr. President, I call on my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to send a message that this will stop now. Hear, hear. That we will play our part in ensuring that these amendments are passed to ensure a new framework that reduces the opportunity for human error or corruption to interrupt enforcement. We will ensure that there is a framework for the technical team to make sure that we get it right this time. This facilitation of disorder without accountability must change now, and the urgent need for new legislation and robust enforcement by technology as well cannot be overstated. I wish, Mr. President, to make it abundantly clear that this bill and its amendments are not about revenue, they're not about discrimination against taxi drivers or any group, and it's not about politics. The ultimate goal of this legislation is to ensure that all road users, whether you're a private road user, a PPV driver, a motorcyclist, or a pedestrian, or a passenger, that all road users can be on the roads in a safe environment where users of the road, operators of vehicles, operate in a responsible manner. The amendments are about law and order, and they're about safety, Mr. President. The safety of our Jamaican people, from the small child walking to school who relies on someone to recognize that a red light means stop and a green light means go. That's what they are taught in school, and that's what will keep them safe on the road. When drivers make sure that when the red is on, they stop, and they only go when the green is on. It's as simple as that, Mr. President. To make sure that the old lady walking to the post office can rely as well that the people on the road will stay on the right side of the road so that they will not have to swerve and put persons on the sides at risk, Mr. President. The families and babies in private motor cars and in public passenger vehicles, that they will use their seat belts not because the government is making another useless rule, but because they keep them safer. It makes them less likely to be injured or to be killed in the event of an accident. So the amendments which seek to improve our enforcement, Mr. President, are measures which seek to ensure greater security and safety of the entire population on our roads. That being said, I want to just touch on the issue of taxi drivers who were concerned about the new provisions. Largely because some people told them a lot of lies about what the amendments were going to do. For some, it was a misunderstanding about the scope of the law. And for others, they thought that it was addressing things which don't actually come under this bill. They will be addressed under the Transport Authority Amendment Act. And for others who were owners concerned about being held responsible for the law breaking of drivers, but they didn't understand that concept. So I'm going to address that particular amendment, Mr. President, but I want to say two things before I do so. And I want to say to the undisciplined taxi drivers, the ones who physically and verbally abused passengers and other operators who wanted to lawfully ply their trade, when you are disrupting the flow of traffic, we are not trying to protect you. Your brand of indiscipline and disorder is not going to be tolerated anymore. So get ready for a new day. Get ready for a new day. Everyone has the right to protest peacefully under the law, within the law. But mayhem and disorder and abuse and violence will not be facilitated, it will not be encouraged, and it will not be accepted. Mr. President, the government was, however, concerned that there were taxi operators who were legitimately concerned about the issues. They were genuinely seeking to get correct information. They wanted to understand, and they wanted to engage lawfully and peaceably in discussions with the government to air their views and to make suggestions. I want to therefore update the Senate to let them know that the Ministry of Transport and Mining has met with transport operators at least 3 times over the last 2 weeks. And up to yesterday, in fact, as a matter of fact, the Minister was present at a conference of the transport operators in Clarendon. And the Transport Authority has been having meetings across the island with associations. So concerns have been aired, misinformation has been corrected, and proposals have been made and are discussed. And in fact, will continue to be discussed in the context of regulations. My understanding is that while some might still not be happy with the new regime that will have owners be liable for the offenses committed by the drivers in certain offenses, and those offenses which are recognized by electronic means specifically, they understand that it is something that has worked in the UK, in Europe, in North America, all over the world, and that it will work here. They understand that there will have to be changes as to how owners make arrangements with their drivers and how much care they take in choosing their drivers. So drivers, gone are the days of taking a man's car and paying my money at the end of the week and do anything with the car while you have it. Owners, gone are the days of taking a man's money at the end of the week, giving the car to any and anybody to drive, and closing your eyes to the damage that your vehicle may be perpetrating on the road. It's a new day for the transportation sector among everyone else. But your businessmen who want to be treated with dignity and respect. So I know that at the end of the day, you welcome this opportunity to conduct your business with a new and higher level of dignity, respect, and discipline. I know your passengers will welcome it. I know you will become comfortable with it as you adjust your arrangements. This is how we all work together to build a better society. So the discussion with the operators is now about whether the regulations can legitimately support this process in any way which is consistent with the implementation of government policy, but it's mostly about issues which don't reside in this legislation and are most likely to be addressed under the Transport Authority Amendment Act. So this brings us right back to the fact that the amendments are intended to address all vehicular users of the road for the benefit of all users of the road, not just taxi drivers. So I'll now comment on the 6 amendments before us. And I want to assure and remind the Senate that none of the amendments to be considered before us are unique to Jamaica. The bill consists of numerous best practices that have already been introduced in other countries and have been carefully researched to be implemented successfully right here. We're well into the 21st century. We're on the cusp of the 4th Industrial Revolution, and we therefore have to find new ways to adapt, new things to adopt, and to be more efficient, and to use technology, the advances that are now available. The automation of some stages of the process that are provided for in the Act, and the incorporation of new electronic devices will aid the process of surveillance and prosecution and reduce susceptibility to human error or corruption by human elements. Let me spend some time on Clause 105. So colleagues will remember, Mr. President, that Clause 105 of the bill speaks to fixed penalties, so punishment without prosecution for certain offences. And specifically, subsection 2 of Clause 105 sets out that a constable may issue the prescribed notice in writing, so that's a ticket, to a person when he has reason to believe that the person committed or is committing a prescribed offence. So this notice, that is the ticket, offers the person the opportunity to discharge his or her liability by paying the fixed penalty, that is the fine, or if not, to attend court to answer the charge. So this is a process we all know and which is currently in place. The further amendment to Clause 105.2 speaks to the issuance of the notice, again the ticket, to the owner of the vehicle rather than the driver of the vehicle, but only in relation to certain prescribed offences, that is, offences that will be prescribed under the regulations that are detected by electronic means. So the current procedure governing a vehicle being physically stopped by a constable still stands, so that if a ticket is being issued after a driver is being stopped by a constable, it is the driver who will be penalized. The driver is going to be ticketed, he will have to pay a fine, and the demerit points will be attached to his license. But if the offense, let us say, for example, running a red light, is detected by electronic means, camera sees him, the system recognizes that a particular vehicle has gone through the light at the wrong time, a constable, after reviewing the video or pictorial evidence in order to verify process, and verify that an offense is being committed, he then issues the notice, clicks, to allow the ticket to be sent to the owner of the vehicle. And this means will be prescribed by registered post or by electronic means, which will include text, emails, or other applications, as will be rolled out as part of the whole system. But the owner will not be awarded demerit points, consistent with how it occurs elsewhere in the world. And this is provided under sub 16, 105.16. But if the owner fails to pay the fine, then late fees will be incurred, as provided also already under 105.13. And as I said before, this process will only be in place for certain prescribed offenses. So for those who ask, why use the license plate information? Why use the registration instead of the picture of the person when detecting traffic offenses? I want to assure you that this option has been considered and respectfully rejected given the research undertaken. There are reasons why it's done this way overseas. The effectiveness of the technology attaches the liability to the vehicle. So it is a vehicle which commits the offense, and that's why it's only going to be for some offenses. With electronic enforcement, when the vehicle is observed, rather than the driver being observed, the owner, therefore, is the relevant person who will carry the burden, similar to some processes in respect of the insurance industry as well. So again, I want to emphasize that the owners have a new responsibility, which in fact they should have had all along, for ensuring that the persons they allow to drive their vehicles do so responsibly. And it'll be important for the development of their own business models, or for how they conduct their business, their arrangements at home, that they seek to either have a right to deduct any fines that their drivers incur from whatever fees they would have earned, or in the case of larger operations, that they are able to deduct from salaries, where speaking about a company that has a distribution network, like a bakery or a drinks distribution firm. They have large fleets of drivers. They'll need to look at their arrangements. But I want to emphasize that Section 105 and the proposed amendments to have owners ticketed for certain offenses detected by electronic means, again, I have to emphasize every time that it applies to everyone. No category will be singled out. The amendment is aimed at, one, modifying driver behavior because there's less impunity. Their operators, their contractors, their employers will be concerned about how they're operating the vehicle. Two, it engages the owners, bringing into focus the need for their greater responsibility about how their motor vehicle is operated on the road, and promoting the safer operation of motor vehicles by both owner and driver or operator. So owners of buses, taxis, will have to think about whether they want a shorter driver. Large distribution networks will have to think about their vetting process for the drivers that they employ to take their trucks island-wide. Parents lending high-powered vehicles to teenagers who have little experience can't ignore the actions of their teenagers on the road. The onus is squarely on owners to ensure that their drivers obey the law and do not breach the provisions of the RTA. Creating a culture of accountability is the first step to ensuring responsible road users, and we feel confident that this sense of discipline, this newly required sense of discipline, will permeate across society in a broader context of understanding law and order. On the final point, Mr. President, I want to just assure more broadly that the draft regulations are almost complete. the Ministry of Transport and Mining is continuing final consultations. And in fact, the Minister has invited and they have agreed that transport operators will designate some persons to sit with the transport team to look at the regulations insofar as the final process is concerned, and to look at whether it is possible to in fact address any of the suggestions that they have put forward within the context, of course, of consistency with government policy. So the additional time, because we want to ensure that when the Act comes into effect, that the regulations are ready. We anticipate that it should take maybe another 3 months, 4 at max. But given the stage where we are, we anticipate about 3 months. So that time will be used between the passage of the Act and it's coming into effect when the Governor General gives his assent. And remember that this is an Act that still allows for different parts to come in at different times. That's provided for in the amendments that we passed before. That the ministry will also embark upon a public education campaign to ensure that everybody understands what is coming. It'll ensure that the public is made aware of the changes, and it'll make sure that the operations and systems on the government side are put in place to support the effective implementation of the Act. So this work has started in parallel. There's work that's happening now as we speak. So I want to just briefly address the 6 amendments that are before us now, Mr. President. So clause 20 is being amended by, in subsection 3, inserting next after the words, his permit or driver's license, the words, or such other document constituting evidence thereof as may be prescribed. So this was a matter which was heavily discussed in the Senate, and amendments were made. But at the time, we were not at a place in terms of the systems, the technology, a place of assurance as to the interoperability of the systems that would require you to provide something else that would allow the constable to check your identity against the driver's license, against the TAJ system, against the Transport Authority system, and if necessary and ultimately the constabulary force records, and ultimately the courts. So this was not at a state. So we were not prepared to make that amendment at that time. But as I said, the work has been continuing. The work has been in parallel with this. So the lower house proposed an amendment to say so that you can provide, and this, the methods by which you can provide the evidence of your driver's license will be prescribed, but we anticipate, for example, that they will include the TRN, which even though it doesn't have a photo, so that clearly you produce a TRN to a police, he wouldn't be able to verify that it's you. Now the police will be able to use the system to interrogate the TAJ system and the JCF system to actually see your license, to see the picture and see that it is in fact you. And of course, that is, I think the first thing that will be implemented will be the copy, but then they will go further, of course, to be able to use the app to interrogate in that way. So we're pleased that in the lower house they were in a position to make that amendment so that people feel a greater sense of comfort around carrying the license. Of course, those who bought the little plastic holders that Senator Charles so kindly brought and shared with us when we passed this, the original bill here, to hold their license on their keychain, that will still be useful. We give you one, Mr. President. I know you got one, though. But to make sure that those persons who legitimately simply forgot their license can prove it, but those who leave the license or who are not licensed, they will be caught. They will be caught, Mr. President, because the system has been verified to ensure that this is the case. So I'll just remind colleagues that it was the constabulary who had the greatest concern about that particular clause because of how persons have been able to evade the law by virtue of having multiple copies, whether of license or TRN. Now the system is bigger than them. Mr. President, in clause 105.2, the amendment seeks to insert after subsection 2, after the words "the person," the words "or in the case of an offence detected by such electronic means as may be prescribed, issue to the owner of the vehicle." So that the section will now read, the subsection, where a constable has reason to believe that a person is committing or has committed an offence referred to in subsection 1, the constable may issue to the person, or in the case of an offence detected by such electronic means as may be prescribed, issue to the owner of the vehicle the prescribed notice in writing. A, offering the opportunity to discharge any liability to conviction of that offence by the payment of the fixed penalty, or summoning the person to attend the court indicated in the prescribed notice to answer the charge outlined in the notice. Because remember, the content of the ticket, Mr. President, would still have the option, and it would be contrary to our constitutional provisions if you did not have the right to contest. So ultimately, even though the ticket is going by electronic means to the owner, you're not losing the right to contest. It is just that the method of issuance of the ticket and receipt of the ticket is going to be different, and that the owner now has been included in the accountability cycle around the use of motor vehicles on the road. So, Mr. President, and as indicated earlier, we still retain the provision for the constable to issue the ticket physically. There's also a new clause 105 sub 16, and this provides that for the insertion after subsection 15, the following section. 16 says, for the purpose of this act, where a notice is issued under subsection 2 to the owner of a vehicle, A, the provisions of this act shall apply as if the owner of the vehicle was the driver of the vehicle at the time of the commission of the offence, in respect of which a notice is issued. But remember, there's still the right to contest. And B, notwithstanding paragraph A, the provisions of section 98, which is the section that deals with demerit points on conviction for certain offences, shall not apply to the owner of a vehicle to whom a ticket is issued under subsection 2. So no demerit points to the owner. So, Mr. President, and again, no demerit points to the owner where electronic ticket issued. Clause 110(1)(ab) has also been amended, Mr. President. In subsection 1ab, inserted after the words vehicles are now the words the electronic detection and recording of offences committed against this act and the method of charging for such offences. So what this is doing is expanding the regulation making powers of the minister to ensure that the minister may make regulations in respect of the electronic monitoring and surveillance of vehicles, which is exactly what we're speaking about with the issuance of tickets when a vehicle commits an offence. And, Mr. President, it ensures that the use of remote surveillance can be adequately covered in legislation where electronic monitoring of vehicles is concerned. Under 110(4), Mr. President, a further amendment was made in the other place where subsection 4 was amended to delete the words subsection 3 and substitute for them the words subsection 1ab, which I just dealt with, and 3. So this means that regulations pertaining to electronic detection will also require affirmative resolution under this Act. The 8th schedule, Mr. President, is also addressed in terms of the amendments, and this is to further operationalize the provision of the functions of the authority. And this is by deleting paragraph 1e as was there, and substituting, therefore, the monitoring and inspection of vehicles included by 1, electronic monitoring and surveillance, and 2, the installation on or near any road such devices as may be approved by the minister in the regulations for the purpose of detecting or recording by electronic means offences against this Act. So I'll just remind you, Mr. President, that the 8th schedule sets out the functions of the authority, and this amendment gives it the responsibility for the installation, monitoring, and surveillance of electronic devices. So the minister will, of course, approve by way of regulations for the purpose of detecting or recording by electronic means offences against this Act. So, Mr. President, I know it's a bit unusual to have amendments come be sent below and then come back to us. But we've done it before. In fact, as recently as with the Integrity Commission, we sent amendments below, further amendments were made and sent back to us. And so we treat with these today. Mr. President, these are the 6 amendments before us today for consideration, and I now commend them to this Honourable Chamber. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Senator Floyd, I recognize you from a different seat.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to make my contribution to the amendment to the Road Traffic Act. And we are very much conscious, Mr. President, that the bill came to the Honourable Senate earlier this year and was extensively debated, and significant amendments were made. And those amendments were accepted in the other place, and further amendments were made. And we are here to deal with those amendments. And that's fine, Mr. President, because that's the nature of our Parliament. We have to make sure that we are robust, we are thorough in terms of the laws that we pass, because you don't want to pass a law today and then have to come back to the Senate tomorrow to deal with amendments. We want to make sure that we do it right from the start. And that is why we as members of the opposition take our responsibility seriously, and we are unapologetic in our stance in terms of the different amendments that we have proposed, because we have seen from time to time in this Honourable Chamber where we have proposed amendments, those amendments have been rejected, but at the end of the day we have been vindicated because of the positions that we have adopted. And so we remain unapologetic in terms of our position. And Mr. President, the Honourable Leader of Government Business, Minister, correctly pointed to the carnage and disorder on the road. And similar to the concerns of the government in terms of the carnage and the disorder on the road, we too are extremely concerned about the conduct of drivers on the road. We are concerned about the extent of road accidents that have taken place on the road. As a matter of fact, I was at a function last Sunday that focused on spinal cord injury. Your brother was there, Minister Charles. And at that conference, the focus was on the extent to which road accidents contribute to spinal cord injury and also to lead to permanent disabling conditions. And that has significant repercussions for the health sector of our country. So we are very much concerned as well as to the level of indiscipline and carnage on the road. When you talk about over 300 individuals dying from road accidents every year, it's really disturbing, Mr. President, and I want to take this opportunity to make an appeal to all who are driving on the road during this Christmas season to make sure that they drive and drive safely. And when they are driving, look out for others on the road, because sometimes it's not you who is driving your vehicle that caused the accident. It's the other person that is not paying attention on the road. And so you have to be very scrutinizing and driving on the road. And then if you drive, don't drink. And if you drink, don't drive. Because that, Mr. President, has contributed to the level of death on our roads. And Mr. President, also we are seeing road construction taking place, and we have seen significant improvement in terms of our road infrastructure over the years. I pointed out the significant expansion of the North Coast Highway from Westmoreland to Port Antonio, which was built in the 1990s into the mid-2000s, and other roads that were constructed. But, Mr. President, what we see happening is on these, what the Minister of Finance said, carpeted roads. That's where we are seeing a lot of accidents taking place. And the authorities will have to pay some attention on these improved road networks that we have had over the past, I would say, 20 years. Mr. President, so the amendments are here before us, and we have some concerns as it relates to some of the amendments, and I will highlight a few, and my colleagues will also express their views as it relates to the 6 proposed amendments. And the 2 concerns that I have, Mr. President, is related to the amendments proposed for 105, in particular as it relates to the owners of motor vehicles. And my concern, Mr. President, I'm taking this concern from the perspective, Senator Charles, as a blind man who owns a motor vehicle. And in that context, I have to have a driver. I mean, my wife keeps on telling me, Senator Williams, that one of the things that she must do before I make any transition on earth. Not at all. I am going to disappoint you. But one of the things that she said that I must do is to drive the vehicle. I know that there are vehicles that are being tested in that regard. But until such time, I have to have a driver. And I in getting a driver, I make sure that I have somebody that I can trust, somebody that I have confidence in, because we all know sometimes we are driving, and as hard-working politicians, you take the opportunity to take a little snooze. You have to make sure that your life is in capable hands. And I have recruited a driver that upon recruiting him, I made sure that I did all the necessary checks to ensure that, one, he does not have any criminal record. Two, to ensure that his driver's license were intact. And three, to ensure that he never had any baggage in terms of tickets carrying with him. Because we have to make sure that whosoever is around us as parliamentarians are fit and proper individuals. So I have done my checks. But, Mr. President, from time to time I do travel. And when I travel, I leave my vehicle with my driver. Now, what should happen if I am overseas and, say for example, my driver is on an errand and he runs the stoplight and the stoplight itself can also malfunction and cause a ticket to be issued. What would happen in that situation, Mr. President? You're exposing me as the owner of a motor vehicle to a situation that I had absolutely no control over. And this is something, I am certain that the framers of this clause never contemplated or thought of such a situation. And I believe, Mr. President, that when we are building when we are formulating legislation, one of the fundamental pillars that the legislation is anchored on is that of fairness. And I don't think that this clause constitutes fairness. And I believe, Mr. President, that there has to be further revision of this particular proposed amendment, because as is, it is going to cause some problem for some decent, honest individuals out there, including some of us who are inside this chamber. Because we all have individuals. We all have individuals who drive for us. So we have to make sure that But also, Mr. President, I spoke to this particular amendment in the context of a person with a disability, because I know that there are numerous other persons with disabilities who have had drivers to drive for them, right? And Minister, as I mentioned that, when I spoke in the debate earlier this year, and I mentioned some of the situation confronting persons with disabilities and driving on the road and getting a motor vehicle license, for example, persons who are deaf, you had indicated that some of these issues would be addressed in the regulation. Now, from my certain knowledge, and this is the second point that I want to make, from my certain knowledge, Mr. President, in the drafts of the regulation, I am not aware of any consultation with the community of persons with disabilities. I am not aware. And it cannot be that we are going to be formulating regulations to govern the Road Traffic Act and consultations are not had with a significant population, persons with disabilities. And Mr. President, I would be extremely annoyed if it is that the regulations are drafted without consultations with persons with disabilities. We live by a mantra, Mr. President, nothing about us without us. We don't want regulations to be drafted in the Parliament that is going to govern persons with disabilities, and then they are not consulted. And then, Mr. President, I am very disappointed, that we last saw and debated this bill in May of this year. That is 7 months ago, Mr. President. And then there was time before that individuals had to prepare regulations to bring to the Senate. And so for minister to say that another 3 months or 3 to 4 months mean that a good year would have elapsed before the regulations are formulated for the Road Traffic Act. And I am saying, Madam Leader of Government Business, you need to tell your colleagues that serious governance issues require serious action. And the action that is required is for the regulations to be drafted and brought to the Parliament forthwith. 7 months have elapsed, and we have not seen the regulation. And then we will have to now wait. We will have to now wait another 3 months or 4 before the regulations are ready. So am I to understand then, Minister, that we are not going to see the effective date of this Road Traffic Act being set until after until the new financial year, which is 2019-2020. Mr. President, these issues are very concerning, and I believe that I would want to see us as the review chamber take some serious look at what is being proposed to us, and as the debate unfolds, Mr. President, no doubt we on this side will be proposing some amendments to the amendments. May it please you, Mr. President.
Leader.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris. Senator Webby.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to contribute to the debate on the further amendments to the Road Traffic Act 2018. Let me start off by saying, without hesitation, Mr. President, that I wholeheartedly support the bill. and the further amendments which were aimed at revamping the road traffic management, use, and control of improving road safety. My other comment would be, Mr. President, why is it taking so long? Mr. President, in simple terms, this will go a long way in restoring law and order in our society. I remember when the Road Traffic Act was amended, Senator Morris, in 1999, mandating the wearing of a seatbelt. There was a big uproar about the changes. And I'm sure Senator K.D. Knight, who I think was the Minister of National Security around that time, remembers that uproar. And let me quote some numbers in terms of at the time. Just prior to this, a study in 1996 showed that only 21.1% of private motor vehicle drivers and 13.6% of front seat drivers voluntarily wore seat belts. A cross-sectional study, Mr. President, was done in 2004, a few years after, and it showed that seat belts were being used by 81.2% of private motor vehicle drivers, up from the 21.1%, and 74% of front seat drivers. That is up from 13.6%. The point that I want to make here, Mr. President and colleagues of the Senate, that this was really a positive indication that sustained enforcement will reap success and mindsets can change if enforcement is adopted. What we witnessed between the 1999 and now, because I'm sure the figure is significantly higher, was a cultural transformation, and I'm sure, as I said earlier, that these figures are much higher. Mr. President, let me say that there's a natural tendency for society to resist change. But when a proper change management program is implemented, which includes communication and awareness of the change and leadership, it can lead to a cultural transformation for the better. As I've just indicated with the seatbelt law, where many, many lives have been saved since 1999. I repeat again, Mr. President, this legislation, if we all think about it, is about restoration of law and order. Mr. President, on a daily basis, all of the senators here today, and may I say, Mr. President, all of Jamaica, we observe the disgraceful behavior of some road users, the blatant disregard for stop signs, pedestrian crossings, and speed limits. There are some PPP drivers that load and unload passengers in authorized areas, boring the lines at traffic signals, turning where the signage clearly says no. It seems to me at times, Mr. President, that there's a general free-for-all which results in mayhem and the carnage which we see on the roadways. May I repeat, Mr. President, that all of Jamaica is looking at us today as legislators. This is really, again, a reflection of the lack of law and order in our society, which, as we heard earlier, has contributed to the loss of over 300 lives in the roads up to November of this year. Mr. President, we all have in this Honourable House the best intentions for Jamaica. I'm sure about that, without hesitation. And as parliamentarians, both in the upper and lower house, we can be passing the best laws in very detailed fashion. But if these laws, Mr. President, are not enforced, we are wasting our time. May I add, Mr. President,
that technology can be a useful tool for enforcing law. In my research, I looked at a study by the London School of Economics and Political Science over a period of 1992 to 2016. And the study found that where speed cameras can reduce accidents by between 17 to 39%. It also shows, and this is a very interesting stat, Senator Brown, that fatalities can be reduced by 58 to 68% where the cameras are within 500 meters of the incident. I think that's powerful numbers. So I therefore, Mr. President, want to support the objective of these amendments being debated today. I know that technology can be costly to implement. And once again, Mr. President, I'm putting forward the proposal that we have a serious sit-down and discussion and have public-private sector partnerships considering for funding and implementation of the technology to help our change of our approach to road safety. Mr. President, we must also have the technology in place to track the number of demerit points that persons accumulate against their license. Sometimes I hear the statistics, and it's unbelievable that one driver can have 700 points. What this is clearly saying to us as a nation is that the current demerit system is ineffective, and we must fix it. It's clear. If persons know that they can get away, no consequences, no punishment, then they will continue to commit the offense. This is why we have a breakdown of law and order in our society. Mr. President, each of us has a responsibility, whether as a driver or an owner, to ensure that our roads are safe. The proposed amendments will hold vehicle owners accountable for their vehicles that are used. Mr. President, whatever course we take towards enforcement, in my opinion, I listened to Senator Morris very carefully, but it is my opinion that law-abiding drivers and vehicle owners have no need for concern. Going forward, vehicle owners must take a zero-tolerance approach to their vehicles being used by drivers who disregard the law. Yes. Let me repeat that, Mr. President. Going forward, vehicle owners must take a zero-tolerance approach to their vehicles being used by drivers who disregard the law. Mr. President, and I think our leader of the House said it, owners of vehicles used for commercial purposes must ensure that they enter into contracts with their drivers which clearly set out the consequences for traffic breaches. And I think that's very straightforward. Mr. President, enforcement, which is really the theme of my presentation this morning, is not easy to accomplish in any country, but it must be done. Mr. President, I am confident that law and order will prevail. We must continue to work together as a nation, and we will see the needed change in the road users' behavior. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Webby. Senator Brown.
Mr. President, I rise to speak on these additional amendments to the Road Traffic Act of 2018. I do so against the background that the opposition, when we were in government in 2016, January, brought to the Senate have been taken to the House and passed a bill seeking to amend and repeal the old Road Traffic Act. This opposition stands for decency and safety on the road. That is why we passed that law in the House in 2016, and it would have been passed before the elections in the Senate, but for the opposition raised by an opposition senator. Well, not an opposition. Asked for delayed. Asked for delay by an opposition senator then.
Senator Brown, with the greatest of respect, I was there when some issues were raised by Senator Williams.
You want to give him back some time?
Those decisions were accepted by all that we needed to relook it. So it's kind of misleading to say it was raised by opposition senator. When Williams, what's his first name? When Arthur Williams raised them, it was accepted generally that there was an issue that needed to be relooked at. So don't make it look as if it's one senator caused the thing to be delayed, because that's not true.
Mr. President, if anything is misleading, it's not what I said. What I said is that opposition Senator Arthur Williams raised some concerns, and we took them. But that's the only reason why it wasn't passed when we were in government. And I think you're concurring on that. 2 years since this government has been in power, they have failed to bring the bill back to the Parliament. The delay for those 2 years is the government's responsibility, and they must take responsibility for that. This opposition, when the bill came in 2 years after, we supported it in the House and in the Senate. In fact, in the House there's 131 amendments. In the Senate, and that was in February, 2 years after they came to power. And in the Senate, 161 amendments for a total of 292 amendments by the House and the Senate. So, any delay in implementing this bill is not the opposition, it's not the taxi drivers, it's not the citizens, it is the government. They had the responsibility and they have failed to bring it. In fact, Mr. President, we ask, since the amendments were passed in May in the Senate, they could have simply passed, concur in the House, and have the Governor General assent to the bill and start any appointed day they wish. The delay for this is the government, and they must take responsibility for the delay. Mr. President, having laid it clear that this opposition supports safety and discipline on the road, I now want to go to the sweet talk about law and order. That you get the impression when the government talk that they are the boss and the people the servants, and we must take what they say. Let us be clear. Let us be clear, Mr. President, that law and order cannot apply only to the taxi men. Can't only apply to the motorists and the bike riders. It must apply to the government itself. And one fundamental principle governing the law and order is the sanctity of the courts in Jamaica. The sanctity of the courts. And part of law and order requires us to respect that it is the court's duty to assess the constitutionality of this and any other law that we may pass in the Parliament. We can't be calling for law and order for the taxi men, for the others, when this government has shown such contempt for the courts, the constitutional court of this country, that is now deliberating on the needs bill. You can't have law and order when the court, while the court is hearing the constitutional challenge, you are advertising needs. While the court says we are going to be deliberating and handing down a judgment, and you are
President,
advertising
point of
needs.
order.
Where is the law and order? Where is the respect for our court?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Brown.
That is contempt
Mr.
for
President.
law and order.
Mr. President, the relevance of the presentation by the
Come do it.
Senator, I can't see. In relation to what is before us this
Law
morning.
and order on the road, in the courtroom,
Senator,
law and order.
Senator Brown.
Get the context. Law and order.
Senator Brown, the debate is in relation to 5 amendments to the road traffic, 6 amendments. I would appreciate if you would stick to the debate as it relates to these amendments. You know that we, as a matter of course, we give a certain amount of latitude, but I think that you're kind of going overboard.
But the leader was speaking about law and order.
Mr. President, if you want to shut me down today, shut me down. But not when the leader of the government business spoke about law and order. And Senator Webber spoke about law and order. That I can't speak about law and order. And that law and order is only for poor people. Law and order must apply to the government of Jamaica as well.
Speak to the question of
Law and order must apply to the government.
Speak to the question of law and order. Speak to the question of law and order within the context of the amendments.
So when you want to tell me about law and order, tell me that you will respect law and order and you will stop your advertisement and the needs while the court
Mr. President,
deliberate
again I raise the point of order that I raised.
Thank you. I dealt with it already. You know, Senator Brown is going to move on from that, I'm sure.
And I'll repeat again if you want.
And again and again. Yeah. Go slowly.
Mr. President, those who appeal to law and order, their sincerity of upholding law and order shows when they set the example for the motorists, for the cyclists. But you can't have it both ways, where you disrespect the sanctity of our courts, but you say to the motorists, you must pay a fine. You must go to the court, bow down to the judge. But we, government, won't do that. What example are you setting? Where's the moral authority to tell the motorists they must honor the ticket when you, by your conduct, shows that you don't honor the sanctity of the courts of our land? Mr. President, having made that point first about who stands for law and order, not when you mouth it, but when you live by it, when you show by your conduct you respect it. And before Senator Sinclair got up on a point of order, I'd have expected Senator Charles, Senator Bryan, Senator Johnson Smith, and any other lawyer on that side to say to the government, stop it. Stop the ads. It's wrong. Show respect for the courts. And especially if they are Queen's Counsel on that side, they should do that. So, law and order. Mr. President, these amendments will not be implemented and can't be implemented until the regulations are approved. All of these regulations, all of these amendments are contingent on the regulations. So there's nothing that should hold the government from passing the law on the 291 amendments thus far, because you can't implement a single one of these amendments until next year. Why hold up the bill? Why hold up the bill?
You're serious.
Pass the bill now.
Implement now.
And then implement in phases. Phase 18, hardly say. Phase 18. So what we're saying, you can, when you come with the regulations, bring these amendments now. But stop holding up the bill. Because not a single one of these, Mr. President, can be implemented without the regulations. That's just the reality. Not clause 20, not clause 105, not clause 110, not the 8th schedule.
Not serious.
So really and truly,
Lip service.
what is being done here
Lip service, PR.
is a delay mechanism by the government from implementing the bill. And then you blame taxi drivers, you blame motorists, you blame opposition. It's the government, it's in your hands. It's in your hands. Implement it. 9 months since the House passed the bill in February. But we have no regulations. No regulations yet. And you're asking us to buy these things, these amendments, depending on regulations which we have not seen. Put another way, Mr. President. The people in the street would say, you're asking us to buy puss in a bag. Puss in a bag. You don't know what that is? You just buy it without knowing?
You don't buy it. Him don't buy it.
So essentially what the government is coming to, instead of implement the bill, is asking us to buy puss in a bag. Accept this without the regulations. And then in clause 105, they're saying to us, they can't catch Quaco, so they want to catch him short.
Poor weakness in the system.
And in doing this, they are committed, in my view, a fundamental departure from the criminal law, which says, the man who commits no act, mustn't be penalized. It is the man who commits the act who must be penalized. Mr. President, it does not appear that I am the only one who shares this view. It is interesting. Sophie, relax. Leave Arbin alone. He knows not what he's saying. Mr. President, it's interesting that in the schedule 1 and 2, I have not seen any penalty for failure to honor 105. Maybe that's my deficiency. I'd be interested for you to point out where in Schedule 1 and 2 it contains penalty for breaching 105. I am concerned that if 105 brings a criminal obligation to the driver, it might very well be unconstitutional. I'm not the only one who said that. Bert Samuels is of that view. And we shouldn't rush this through as we rush through the needs bill.
Well, not sure.
So let us take our time, since this will not come into being for another 3 to 4 months. Let us pass the others and do the proper research on this, rather than criminalize people for what they have not done. So I say that because 1055 speaks to criminal proceedings, and I'm concerned that we are criminalizing people for what they have not done. We don't know, for example, because of the absence of regulation, after the breach is committed, how long will the ticket be sent? Will the ticket be sent to Dover District? And because you're registered to Dover District, because that's my address, and I don't go to the post office, and the post office don't deliver it to me, I have a liability which increase month after month after month, as 105.13 says? Is that fair? Where's the Barbara Green in St. Elizabeth? So let's send it to Barbara Green district. In Southfield?
Yeah, and the mistake got robbed.
In Southfield, PO.
And the postman got robbed in district.
Right? Just tell me, you're going to penalize that person? Where in the regulation will it tell us the efficiency measures?
So there's a seed regulation.
How many days after it must come? So let me appeal again. Bring us the regulations before we get to this clause. So we need the regulations. I never knew I would join the Attorney General who, when she was a senator, described legislation without regulations, the laws, the acts without regulation, as piecemeal. This one is indeed the mother of all piecemeal legislation. We had more than enough time to bring the regulations. Bring the regulations and hold off on these 5 and go and implement that which we pass. Truth is, Mr. President, truth is, I don't trust the government in creating new offenses as is being attempted in 105. It may work elsewhere, but Jamaica, it's a new offense for Jamaica. Let us discuss it more and not push it on the back door of asking for concurrence where we don't even get a chance to discuss it in committee. Because it wasn't in the bill. Hold it off. Don't implement, well, you can't implement them. Come back when you bring the regulations so we know what we're buying into. I don't trust the government, therefore, to bring new offense to penalize people, more so for acts that they did not commit. And as the minister said, this is not about the taxi drivers and the minibus. Because it has been sold that it is indisciplined taximen. And God knows, Mr. President, we can't take some of them on the road. Can't take most of them. And we can't take some of the private motorists on the road too, who drive like shatter drivers. But this bill is not about taximen and minibus. This central web is about big companies and small companies. It's about private and public companies. Be it JUTC, be it immigration, be it water commission. It's about everybody. It is not it's about rent-a-cars, the rent-a-car business. And in the consultation that was supposed to have gone in the last 2 weeks, I don't hear that there's any consultation with the rent-a-car companies. But it's going to affect them too. It's going to affect the relationship, Mr. President, between you and your mechanic. When you leave your car with your mechanic. And was it the minister who said it is going to affect families because your son might have driven out the car, or your sister or your brother visiting. And the law requires us now to keep a record of the movement of our cars on a 24-hour basis. In fact, we don't even need this 105 because already, Minister, you have a clause 69. You have a clause 69 in this bill, which says that every owner, Senator Webby, maybe you never read that, every owner now must keep a record. And if the police come to you and say, who was driving the Grace truck and such, myself, that person in your company must give answer. Failure, Grace will be charged under Section 69. The same thing for you, Mr. President. Your son drives out the car. You didn't know. You didn't know you're fast asleep. You're probably gone abroad. And they say you must keep a record. And if the police come to you and you don't know, you can be charged. So that 69 already says you must give the data to the police. Why now go and charge the owner again? So the owner faces a double whammy. Give me the data, you don't give me the data, you must go to court same time. Not right. Not right. The double whammy applies to every citizen, potentially. And therefore, I don't like 105, and I'm opposed to 105 as it is now. Maybe you can convince me later on, when I see the regulations. But at this point, I can't support it. Therefore, Mr. President, let me make it clear. To bring a new offense, in addition to Clause 69, which is new, against the citizens of Jamaica, I don't think this government have the moral authority so to do. Just like the thousands of motorists who have honored their tickets in the courts, taxi drivers, private people, they are showing contempt for the ticketing systems in the court. But not them alone showing contempt, Minister. Your government, of which you and Senator Reid sits in the cabinet, is showing contempt to the Supreme Court, to the Constitutional Court, by your conduct in the advertisement of the NIDS legislation, while that legislation is the subject of scrutiny, consideration, and deliberation by the Constitutional Court. Hasn't it dawned on you all that that's contempt, and that you all should just pause, respect the Chief Justice of this court, and wait for the judgment? Is there no shame in this government?
No.
Is there no shame in this government?
You know that.
Mr. President, this government has no moral authority to talk about law and order on the road when they are not demonstrating such law and order in this fundamental constitutional challenge to our bill here. This is contempt by the government for the court. Where's the moral authority, I ask again, to discipline motorists? Add to that, Mr. President, and you can all rise and point of order now. I give you the notice. Where's the moral authority of this government to penalize motorists when the government agents spend as much as $1,000 on a four-tiered, topsy-turvy,
Point of order.
chocolate
That's a point of order.
for a minister of government?
And the cake.
A pint of order on the topsy-turvy cake?
Thank you, 1 minute. Yes.
Relevance, what is before.
But the senator know what he's doing, and him give you advance notice of it. He said it, you know. He says, I'm going to breach the law now, so stand up and make the point about it. Which is what he has done.
Never said
So
that.
Senator Brown, just
Why
keep the
does
thing
no
on a
jump in
regular.
there? No, because you see, I am making a point that the government is contemptuous of the system, just as the motorists who don't pay their tickets are. And when they do the topsy-turvy, four-tiered chocolate birthday cake, that represents a lack of moral authority. Where's the moral authority to penalize motorists when agents of this government waste millions of dollars of taxpayers' money and surprise birthday parties from ministers and chairman of board? Where's the moral authority to penalize
Mr.
motorists?
President, on a point of order.
Where's the moral
On a
authority
point
to
of
penalize
order.
motorists?
On a point of
under
order,
this?
Mr. President. On a point of order, Mr. President, the matter is relevant. If the senator wishes to discuss law and order, he must discuss it within the context of the road traffic amendments. If he wants to discuss moral authority, he must discuss it in the context of the Road Traffic Act amendments. The standing orders are clear about matters being raised which are relevant to the item before members on the contents of debate, the content of speeches and debate, Mr. President. I do not think that you should be allowed to continue to repeatedly and contemptuously run afoul of that law, of that rule, while simply repeating the same offences.
Senator Brown, you have made the point concerning the topsy-turvy cake. Can you move on?
Mr. President, I'm moving on from the cake. But let us be clear. The amendments before us require the concurrence of the Senate. This senator believes that in giving my concurrence, moral authority is an important thing. In the week when President George Bush is buried, and moral authority is elevated as an important point of principle. For me, moral authority is important. For them it may not be. But for me, moral authority is important. So in discussing my concurrence,
How you know that in that one use traffic fines to buy cake?
We don't, exactly.
In determining my concurrence or not with this resolution from the House, in determining my current, I ask, where's the moral authority for a $17 million sign in Montego Bay? Where's the moral authority for a $35,000? Yeah? Stop what?
What it is that you are doing, you know what you are doing is wrong.
Speaking on the bill.
You are not speaking on the bill. You are not speaking on the bill. So what I'm asking you to do, I'm not going to seek to use word that you have used before to muzzle you, and I'm not doing that. I'm saying, in the interest of the debate, keep the thing structured and move on.
Mr. President, let me make it clear. If I'm out of order, so rule. But the people of this country, including that man at KPH, lying on the floor, can't get a bed. He's asking through me, where is the moral authority to leave him on the floor at KPH and increase the fines on motorists? That's the question.
Senator Brown.
Mr. President, a point of order, please. A point of order, Mr. President.
Senator Brown.
Be prepared to do that.
Senator Brown.
We are descending.
Yes,
no
sir.
doubt you are going to have extended opportunity to discuss that, because you have made your contribution to the State of the Nation debate. I'm going to make a list of all the things. You can talk about the sign and the cake and the report. Right now, please deal with the amendments to the road traffic.
Mr. President, these will they enforce these? Why, when the police bring in $1 billion in revenue from tickets, we can't give them an increased salary? Where's the moral authority to be asking them to punish motorists more? Because you say the constable must send the ticket, but you're not prepared to do it? You're not prepared to look after them? Mr. President, where is the moral authority when what we're doing is employing friends, unqualified at inflated salary? Where is that?
Senator Brown,
A point of order, Mr. President.
Senator Brown, you need to stick to the regulation. You want this? What you are doing is saying to me, rule me out of order and tell me to be quiet. That's what you're begging me to do, So, if that is what you want to do, I rule that you need to stick within the terms of the debate of the amendment. That is what I rule, and I so rule. Sound familiar, Senator Knight?
Mr. President, let us be clear. Let us be clear. You can rule as you have ruled that I must stick within the bill. Who determines whether what I say in my speech? It's for you. When I say it, you can say that's out of order. But I must be given the latitude to determine my concurrence. And I fear, Mr. President, that what is at stake here is my right to make moral judgment when I discuss these amendments.
No,
That's what I feel.
you can determine what your moral right is and what your moral assessment is. I can determine how you present your presentation in the debate within the context of the standing orders of the Senate.
Yeah.
Always been in this honorable chamber that when members are making their contribution on a bill, they are given latitude to speak on matters relating to the bill and draw examples to substantiate points in the bill. That is what the debate is about, and that is how we debate in the chamber. And he has been, Mr. President, connecting the points that he has been raising, because he's pointing to moral authority and linking it back to the bill. And I believe, Mr. President, that the member should be given the opportunity to complete his presentation uninterrupted.
And Senator Morris, you don't think that I have given the member latitude? No. In your honest assessment, you don't think that I have given the member more than latitude?
Mr. President.
No, hear the question I'm asking you. In your honest assessment, you don't think I have given the speaker more than latitude?
Mr. President, you might have given him the latitude, but the interruptions from the members on the government side is very frustrating and disturbing.
Yes. That's what they're seeking to do when it juke them.
Mr. President, Clause 105 that is being proposed to be amended has the potential of sending motorists, not just taxi drivers or minibus drivers, motorists possibly to jail, to prison, for acts they have not committed. The government seems to be willing to send people to jail for things they didn't commit. I ask the question, no flight, hold on flight. I ask the question, who is going to go to jail for this Auditor General report?
Morris.
Who is going to go to jail for these acts committed?
Senator Morris, you're interrupting the speaker now, you know. Yes, the same thing you tell him I am to prevent. Allow him to do what he's doing. So Senator Brown, continue please within the terms of the amendment.
Mr. President, I'd like to close my speech. And I close on the point that innocent people are likely to go to jail for offense they didn't commit under Section Clause 105. The issue for me, if that's fair to the government, it's not fair to me. And this is why I will not support at this time 105. But the question has to be asked as the citizen in the country is asking, be it the observer, editorial, or other, who is going to go to jail for this corruption here and the corruption in the deep Bushing report where ministers were described as being mendacious? Who is going to go to jail for the used car? Who is going to go to scandal? Who is going to go to jail for the UDC land sale in Montego Bay? With those, Mr. President, I close my presentation.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Brown. Senator Brown, thank you. Senator Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Mr. President, it was not long ago that we debated the road traffic bill in this chamber. And it is here we are here again dealing with these further amendments which were made in the lower house, specifically clauses 20, 105, and 8 schedule. And since these amendments were proposed, Mr. President, it has stirred much public discussion which is in itself good, as it will draw greater attention by many of our citizens to this proposed legislation, which has as its primary objective the reduction of deaths and maiming of persons that continues on our roads. Mr. President, death by motor vehicle accident on our roads for the year 2018 have surpassed 343, and there are several weeks left to the end of this year. And this mark has been achieved in spite of public education, police action and presence, and improved driving surface. But when I look on the breakdown, Mr. President, there's a revelation that the deaths involve 295 males and 48 females. Sometimes it leads us to wonder why males find themselves also in this particular area in such predicament. Additional breakout of the statistics inform us that you have 73 pedestrians, 60 drivers of private motor cars, 50 passengers in private motor cars, 8 drivers of public passenger motor vehicles, 10 passengers in public passenger motor vehicles. And I just want to pause here because some persons, and in particular members of the opposition, and I will get to it in a little while, they were the persons that brought these amendments and dedicated it as if it was an attack upon taxi operators. And when you look on the debate as it took place in the lower house, Mr. President, Member of Parliament Dr. Maurice Guy is quoted in Hansard as saying, many of us recognize that the challenges we are having on the road and the indiscipline, the mayhem, the madness that takes place on the road is not confined just to the ordinary private driver. Primarily, some do, but the taximen who operate, and here he goes off, the taxi drivers who operate these vehicles are the main offenders on the road. Morris Guy. And in the main, they are not operated by the owners, but any driver who comes along and presents his driver's license to him and he wants a job, he will get the job. The accusation, the focus of this legislation, which has been clearly stated by a leader, is not one that is focused on taxi operators. The opposition in the lower house led the conversation in that way. And he went further in a way to denigrate even these hard-working taxi operators. And I'm saying that in spite of the record that the majority of motor vehicle accidents, deaths that are caused by motor vehicle accidents, were not caused by taxi operators. And the record was there for them to realize that. Dr. Morris Guy went on to say, adopting the words of another speaker, he referred to these taxi operators as mad drivers. I like that they are mad drivers with flying missiles across the stoplights. So, Mr. President, you know, when I view the comments from the lower house, it was the opposition who sought to focus it in that way and to blame taxi drivers. But Mr. President, Jamaica continues to bleed and families are made to grieve losses caused by mishaps, accidents on our roadways. The public purse and the public medical facilities are pressured into taking care of many of the victims of the wanton carelessness of our motorists. Mr. President, the Minister of Health, the Honourable Christopher Tufton, informed the lower house in this debate on these amendments that one motor accident victim who was treated at the University of the West Indies had a total cost care of $17 million. Mr. President, it was surmised that if that person, a motorcyclist, was being responsible and abiding by the Road Traffic Act, wore his helmet, the extent of his injury, which resulted in such cost, would not have been anywhere near that. Mr. President, on November the 13th, 2018, I was on my way to this very parliament to attend a joint select committee when I got the unfortunate news of an accident on the Rose Hall Main Road in Montego Bay, which claimed the lives of one adult and 3 children, and a 4th child suffered serious physical injury. Mr. President, all the persons were from the community of Providence Heights in St. James, a community that I have the distinct pleasure of representing in the St. James Municipal Corporation. So I wish to publicly express condolences to the families of Kevin Hamilton, who was the driver, Tiara and Tiana Thomas, and Latisha Williams, all students of the John Rollins Success Primary School, and with speedy and full recovery to the only survivor of that horrific accident, young Master Keja Hamilton. You know, Mr. President, and the comments were made in relation to offenses detected by electronic device, primarily those where persons breach the stoplights. And in looking at these amendments, it caused me to reflect also on another accident that took place in Montego Bay, which took the life of a noted attorney at law, Mr. George Thomas, at a stoplight, where the driver went through when it was not appropriate for him to have done so, and caused the death of someone who was a significant contributor to the Montego Bay community. Sometimes it amazes me. I wonder, why is it that persons have to break stoplights? I can't understand it. And what it is reflecting and saying to me, Mr. President, is that many of these drivers do not know the road code. They do not appreciate the road code. Because when you look on the road code, when you're going for a driver's license, there is a book that we are required to study. This is the book. We are required to study this book. And in this very book, Mr. President, what does it say about stoplights? That you stop on yellow. You don't stop on red. You stop on yellow unless your vehicle has already crossed the stop bar. You ask many of our drivers today, what does yellow mean? They say speed up, drive faster. That is how they understand stoplights. So, Mr. President, this administration is doing its part in correcting many of the ills in this area. Past administrations, as was said by Senator Floyd Morris, has made their significant contribution in seeking to reduce road fatalities by putting in improved road surface. But sometimes you wonder, because you put in improved road surfaces, because there's a complaint that because of the potholes you have to serve it cause accident, you put in improved road surfaces, there is a complaint from others that people are driving too fast. Continued public education by administrations. Improvement in the mobility of the police, and I must congratulate this administration again for the new public order unit in the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch, established to deal with traffic management and to ensure order in public spaces. Mr. President, many persons complain about lights not existing on our thoroughfares. This administration has cleared the bill to the Jamaica Public Service of $7 billion, and our citizens must demand that street lights are put in and working at appropriate places along our thoroughfare to ensure that visibility is there and we will have less traffic accidents. Legislation, Mr. President, and continue review of legislation.
Let me just say something. I'm going to make Senator Morris rule on the issue of relevance.
Mr. Mr. President, I suspect you are being tongue-in-cheek, but you are the presiding officer, and I think it's a little bit disrespectful.
Senator Morris said that I am to allow latitude.
No, it's a little bit disrespectful.
Senator Brown, come on, please.
No, I am making the point because I think you're going to withdraw the comment about Senator Morris.
Yeah, man, I withdraw it.
Thank you, sir.
Proceed, Senator Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm going to apply the rule as enunciated by Senator Morris with respect to relevance. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I've stuck to road traffic act. Mr. President, there needs to be serious inquiries made in some areas in which there are many anecdotal stories. And many persons tend to shy away from it. I am not going to shy away from it today, Mr. President. But the selling of driver's license is something that needs to be brought to an end. Yes. Mr. President, it is because of the shortcutting that is taking place. I can give you an incident where I attended on the motor vehicle examination depot, and I won't say exactly where. Accompanied someone, and the person who accompanied came to me and asked me to provide them with a certain sum. And I asked a question, what you doing with that? You don't need monies at this point. He says that for them, it's them friend come to get them driver's license. And the certain payments had to be made in order to shorten the process. So the selling of driver's license is something that needs to be looked at. The creation of bogus licenses. And Mr. President, there must be greater responsibility by our motorists in appreciating the road code, manufacturers' specifications in relation to vehicles. The majority of our motor vehicle accidents have been caused by irresponsible and bad driving practices. And I must say, because I was someone who would have preferred that we would have kept the driver's license requirement in the legislation, but it was removed elsewhere. But I think that that would have sent a proper signal to say that we must be responsible when you're taking a motor vehicle out onto the road. I thought it should have removed. Mr. President, from that very time, my key ring is my driver's license. Mr. President, it is difficult to legislate one into being responsible. But I want to congratulate Member of Parliament and Minister Robert Montague to be encouraging motoring education in schools in his constituency. And I would recommend to all members of Parliament that they follow in that vein. And in the debate, further comments were made by the minister in a campaign that is dubbed Free Up the Badge campaign, where the minister is looking on revamping driver education to focus on customer service, safety, and defensive driving in the public transport system. We need to foster greater responsibility in our citizens who use the roads, particularly our motorists, owners, and drivers alike. So, Mr. President, in relation to the amendments, I stand in full support of the amendments that are before us today. The amendments being proposed seeks to make the owner of a motor vehicle liable for offences detected by electronic means. It's a simply worded amendment, but many have made much of it due to what I believe is poor or wrong interpretation. Whether that was done wittingly to cause disturbance in the public space is debatable. But I must say to my opposition colleagues, Mr. President, that they must behave as a responsible opposition. Mr. President, some members of the opposition and their surrogates have gone around the country and have manipulated the taxi operators with fake news as it relates to these amendments and other issues, particularly the fines being introduced under the new Road Traffic Act.
If the member is making accusation that members of the opposition take that to be members of Parliament and members of the Senate, I take it to be so, and is making accusation for which there is no evidence being provided, and slurring the opposition in so doing.
No, I don't
and I think that is disrespectful, and I urge that the member provide the evidence or withdraw it, because the tendency is now where people are saying opposition of connection with this. You will hear it later on. These things are dirty and unparliamentary, and they must not be pursued.
Senator Brown, if he says member of the opposition, I don't take it to mean members of the Senate opposition or many members of the parliamentary opposition. But you can clarify. You can clarify.
Mr. President, I saw a post on social media from known operatives saying, now that the taxi operators are on strike, how can we get the coaster buses to do the same? What? Mr. President, there was an attempt to give the impression that these amendments were a government proposal. They were a government proposal being imposed with a view to pressure drivers and owners of PPV units. Mr. President, two things must be made abundantly clear: that the proposal covers all owners of vehicles. And secondly, Mr. President, the opposition supported the amendments in the lower house. So, lead it, and don't encourage the disturbance that took place and put many of our citizens at a tremendous inconvenience. And you know, Mr. President, I go back to Hansard to look on what was said in the lower house by Dr. Morris Guy again. He said, my contribution in January and February of 2015, when it was debated in the House, was a recommendation then that the government could look at electronic surveillance as it related to the vehicles that were used in committing the infractions. So, Mr. President, Dr. Morris Guy had the same position that we are dealing with today in 2015. Mr. President, Member of Parliament Michael Phillips, Member of Parliament Michael Phillips said, so, Mr. Speaker, I am sure there are members on this side who would like to add, but from where I stand, there are no objections to the amendments. It seems, when I look at this, that the opposition for convenience talk through two sides of the mouth. And it gives me great concern, because the opposition must always be responsible and must lead. They have a duty of leadership. It is not only government, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, why do they go around? Why do they go around giving a falsehood and not make it known that their position was one of full support? Mr. President, it would have been better that the opposition sought to encourage good driving habits and reform in the industry than to encourage disruption and mayhem. Mr. President, I would implore the leaders of the taxi associations across this country to have an objective look at what is being proposed and not be guided by any false narrative or fake news. It is not a legislation that targets taxi operators. Mr. President, the proposed legislation brings to life in this act the principle of vicarious liability that is already known to civil law. Under that principle of vicarious liability, and with specific reference to motorists, the owner of a vehicle will bear the responsibility for damage or loss caused by the vehicle whilst that vehicle is under the control of an employee or agent of the owner. Clause 105 does the same thing, but limits it to specific offences. That is those detected by electronic means, such as red light offences, as was said earlier. Mr. President, it is my belief that it's a reasonable provision and should be appreciated by all for what it seeks to achieve. Mr. President, this provision is not unique to Jamaica. It exists in several states in the United States of America, as well as in Commonwealth countries. Mr. President, the Road Traffic Act in Australia goes much further than what is even proposed in this amendment, as it attaches demerit points to the owner for the driver's offence, and these demerit points are doubled on holidays. Mr. President, it is my belief that having such a provision that makes the owner vicariously responsible will go a far way in transforming the way persons operate as owners and drivers, and will engender a self-policing mechanism into the motoring public. How is that, one may ask? Mr. President, owners will take a greater care to prevent their motor vehicle getting into the hands of persons who have little or no regard for other users of the road or the road code. In moving forward with this amendment, I propose to the owners of motor vehicles who give their vehicles to others to drive, comply with Section 69 of the new law. Know your driver. In fact, know your customer is something that is in other legislation. Know your driver, the name, address, and full particulars of your driver. Know the driver's ability and attitude to driving. Check his driving record. And I want to suggest that the government should be obligated to assist in the production of driving records to persons who want to seek it out, to determine a person, to do their due diligence, to determine the ability of individuals. Mr. President, make personal arrangements to recoup your loss. Example include indemnity clauses, and that was said by Senator Webby. Include indemnity clauses in the contracts of employment between the driver and owner. Cut out the practice of allowing vehicles to remain in one's name although they have been sold. It involves many other issues, but I have seen many persons who leave vehicles in their name for whatever reason, although they have disposed of it, and have other persons who they don't know driving their vehicles. It is not good practice for many reasons. And Mr. President, establish within the taxi associations and their various lobby groups a driver registry. Alternately, Mr. President, the Transport Authority may be encouraged to have a driver registry so that persons can do due diligence with the assistance of the Transport Authority, and it will provide some protection to those persons who are owners of motor vehicles that are in the industry to provide public transport. Mr. President, I just make a few comments in respect to the increased fines under the Road Traffic Act. And there's a further argument being paraded about speaking to the level of fines. And one was rubbish as fake news when they were speaking about $75,000 for some badge. Mr. President, I say to all motorists that the government coffers would run dry if every motorist obeyed the law. Mr. President, we must move away from the argument that it is all about revenue. Every law provides a sanction as a deterrent. The Road Traffic Act generally provides for fines. Mr. President, research coming out of Australia shows that penalizing bad and unsafe driving is an important weapon in the fight to reduce death and serious injury on our roads. Knowing that a driving offense can mean a heavy fine and demerit points that could lead to a loss of a driver's license or ability to license one's motor vehicle is a powerful motivator for drivers and owners to do the right thing. And Mr. President, we heard the talk, and it was mentioned by Senator Lambert Brown. Who spoke about the fines and the police. I just want to say that I have great confidence in the police. I mean, there are some amongst them, obviously, who will run afoul. But the administration, whether it is presently the Jamaica Labour Party administration, that we must ensure that body cams and dash cams are implemented in the shortest possible time. Yes. It serves many purposes. When you look at what happens in other countries with dash cams, and in respect to reducing the possibility of corruption, we must ensure that our system is so equipped that the issue of corruption, possibility of corruption taking place out there does not occur. Mr. President, those are my comments in relation to these amendments. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Sinclair. Senator Knight.
Thank you. Thank you, President. President, could I have just one moment to adjust these chairs I've put on weight recently? Mind you, I was eating cake, but a cheaper one.
A cheaper one.
President, it's always difficult for any minister to propose legislation that is going to that is going to criminalize the behavior of citizens. Very, very difficult. And in so doing, great care has to be taken, and there has to be a high degree of certainty as to what is the mischief that is being dealt with. As has been said, enforcement is the key, because my considered view is that if the law as it exists was being properly enforced and fairly enforced, we wouldn't have the kind of mayhem that we do have on our streets. Notwithstanding that there are some difficulties because of the state of the roads, etc. But I am not going to go into the state of the roads. President, the police are charged with the responsibility of enforcing the laws. And what we have to do now is to say to the police, please, great effort is being made to give you the tools to be able to control the indiscipline on the roads. So enforce the law. Enforce the law fairly. And enforcing the law does not mean that every time a motorist commits an offense, it must result in a charge. It doesn't. A zero tolerance approach must be taken, but zero tolerance does not mean charging for every infringement every time, because there are occasions on which a warning would be sufficient and persons would abide thereafter. Those who are given to disciplined behavior. But there must be a fearless discharge of duties. Now, one of the things that I saw in the newspapers, can't remember which one, was in an editorial a couple of days ago, was whether or not, if high fines are imposed, whether that is likely to have a deterrent effect. And I don't pretend to have the answer, but I feel comfortable in saying that high fines can assist in the process. But high fines doesn't mean unreasonable fines. They must be proportionate to the particular offense that they're attached to. And in enforcement, the concept of the absence of corruption must play an important role. And the absence of corruption is going to be very critical, because the police are going to, in these circumstances, they're going to be offered bribes. They're going to be offered bribes. But they must have the moral courage to say no. No. No, there's a tendency in the society to say that, well, you know, John Brown is doing it and John Brown gets away with it. Why can't we do it? And so there has to be, from the highest level, there has to be the kind of behavior which will cause others to understand that if at the highest level corruption is non-existent, then they must take their cue from that. And so the political directorate, for example, from which, you know, many persons take their cue. The political directorate, in encouraging enforcement, must behave in such a way that the enforcers will say, here are leaders who are showing us the way by their own behavior. If they see corruption from our leaders, then the enforcers of this law are not going to behave as they ought to. And therefore, my appeal is to colleagues in the political directorate to set the example. And then for those now who are enforcers in the political directorate to take action. To take action. Because if they pay a blind eye to when their own behave corruptly, then the enforcers of this legislation are going to say, see it there? See it there? They passed the law for us to enforce. But the rules under which they are to operate are breached by their own, and nothing is done about it. And so the enforcers begin to say that where the behavior of the government is scandalous, then why should we be pointed out as the corrupt ones? So as we deliberate on and pass this legislation, those at the commanding heights must understand that if they are corrupt, they are breaching the law. And the law should be enforced against them, because prison is not for the white, the black, the brown, the rich, or the poor. Prison is for all transgressors who deserve to spend some time in the custody of the state.
We have some in the past.
The thing is, as the members of the political directorate, we have to understand that you can eat your cake and have it. You can eat your cake and have it. So you can set a bad example to the enforcers and then expect that the enforcers are going to disregard your behavior. So there I go on the issue of enforcement, on the issue of corruption, and the issue of moral authority. Because it's simple, I close this point with this statement. It is simple. If a constable sees a minister, for example, breaching the law and continuing as if nothing has happened, then he expects the same treatment. So let's all set a good example. No, Mr. President, this Senate is a review chamber. And the position in my mind is very clear. That a member of my party downstairs supports a particular provision and has a particular interpretation and outlook cannot bind me. Because if it binds me, I cannot review what he has done. And therefore, the Senate's mandate would have to change to being a rubber stamp. Regrettably, if that change comes about, that because somebody downstairs says X, I must say X, then it is time for me to go fishing. I am not going to be bound as long as I am in the Senate and I'm called on to perform the review function. I'm going to review. And this is where, for example, with this, we must show the strength of character and of mind to be able to say, colleague downstairs, I don't agree with you. This law has unconstitutional elements. And though you passed it, I'm not going to support it. And I always say, persons like us up here who are appointed, we have to say, well, we're not doing it, and be prepared to take the consequences. But mind you, we must understand that there is something special about the Senate in the sense that the Prime Minister can't fire one senator. He can't fire one senator. If a senator exemplifies weakness by putting his or her hands clearly in that of the person who appointed, then that person is ignoring the Constitution of Jamaica.
Mr. President, the time being 1:20, I ask that the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day.
The question is that the time being 1:20, the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day. In favor? Aye. Against? Senator Knight.
So when we behave and demonstrate a position of strength, then the enforcers take a cue from us. That's what they do. Let me move on to a different aspect. Taxi drivers. Taxi drivers are in the news. They are upset, I'm told, about it. I read about it. Well, you know, I believe that this statement cannot be contradicted. I am the only person in the Senate who has been a taxi driver. When I was at university in the United States of America in Washington, D.C., that was what I did to support myself. I was a taxi driver. I know Washington, D.C. I knew Washington, D.C. better than any area in Jamaica. And I knew the coordination of the lights, etc., and so on. Taxi driving in some jurisdictions is a hustling job. Time, getting from point A to point B in the quickest time, is something very important to the taxi driver. And in Washington, D.C. it was, because Washington, D.C. operated on zones at the time. If you cross Randolph Avenue coming from East Street, then you get into 90 cents before you're 60 cents. Cross Military Road, $1.20. That's how it was, driving straight up Georgia Avenue. No. New York taxi drivers are terrible. Horrible. But they are not as horrible as they used to be one time. And you know one of the reasons? They operate on meters, Senator Graham. They operate on meters. And you sit in a taxi in New York, on a crowded street, and you just hear the meter ticking over. And each time the meter ticks over, when I'm sitting it, I take out my wallet to see if I have enough to pay, or am I running out? Maybe, I don't know. We used to have meters here. I don't know if one of the things we have to look at is whether or not meters ought to be used. I'm just throwing that out. I don't know. But I will tell you this. The taxi drivers in Jamaica, and particularly in the corporate area, they drive badly. But so do others. So do others drive badly. And one of the things that was the focus of the demerit points was road safety. That was the focus. The points controlled that aspect. And of course, the fines are important for breaches. So this bill sets a number, specific number of demerit points, where persons, the licenses will be suspended, I think, for a year. But let me tell you something. If you suspend the license of a bad driver, and after a year, you take him back on the streets, you're still going to have a bad driver. Because it is not that they can't maneuver the vehicle. So the testing that this mandates is just going to be under controlled circumstances. But the bad attitude and behavior remains. So when the demerit points were brought in, that was step one. Step two was to move to a position where after certain points, you had to go to driving school. Yeah. And so, for example, that's what happens in Washington, D.C., and I've said in this Senate that the demerit points was modeled after the system there. So you go to driving school because it is not simple being able to press an accelerator or a brake or turn a steering wheel. It is how you read the traffic flow, how you understand the importance of giving way to prevent a traffic jam, how you turn when another vehicle is going so and so. That takes driving sense. Driving sense. We have a lot of our drivers on the roads. They can drive at 120 miles an hour. 120 miles an hour. But somehow they don't anticipate that half a mile up the road there's going to be a turn. They don't anticipate how long it's going to take to cover that half mile. And therefore you have to start slowing down. So, I am asking that we look ahead and we see if there can be a time when we have certified driving schools. No, this is just testing. I'm saying you go there, you spend time there. This doesn't say so. Well, there you go. This is why you see, here you have me wasting my breath because you plan to do it. But I don't see it in the regulations. No, I know, leader. But I know you're not interrupting. You are highlighting that which my colleague Senator Brown said, the need for the regulations. There are offenses in this bill that are based on undeveloped, unpublished, unknown regulations. So when we pass this, if they appoint a day before the regulations, this act as it would then be could not be properly enforced. So it is necessary to have the regulations, and a bill as important as this one is, the regulations should be debated simultaneously with the bill. So, I'm pleased to hear about that. I'm happy about the texting. And another, I don't know if the regulations will cover this. But one of the ways, for example, in Washington, D.C. then, is that demerit points would not simply be removed by the effluxion of time. Demerit points could be removed if the transgressor goes to the driving school and successfully concludes. And what would be happening then is that you would have a safer road. A safer road. This bill as it is not necessarily going to bring about a safer road. Not necessarily. So we have to look to these things when we are developing legislation, whether the actual parent statute or subsidiary. Let me just look at a clause or two. I have a difficulty. No, I'm looking at clause 69. Well, I have a bill in my hand, and I'm not going to be debating a bill and tell me that it is not before us. It has to be. Well, tell me what prevents this from being before us. I find some incongruity between clause 69 and clause 105. And the incongruity is this. You place upon the owner specific responsibilities. That's what you do. You place on the owner those responsibilities. You say that he shall satisfy himself about the identity, about the skills, and about his status as a licensed driver, and about his residence. And you say that if that is not done, then an offense is committed by the driver, by the owner. And then you say, you put a responsibility on the owner to provide certain information to the constabulary force. So it is very clear what is expected of the owner and what is prescribed in the law. But now in 105, you put a strange kind of onus on the owner. Because where the driver does not pay, the owner has to. I don't understand that. Why are you putting that onus on me up front? Make it a criminal offense if I don't satisfy it. I'm giving it to the police. The onus is on the police to find that person. It can't be on me. This man leave my employment. I must go run down the place and find him. What do you have a police force for? You have residence, you have name, you have license number. Why? Why? And then it is ridiculous, quite frankly. To go on as has been done in 105, to say, what's it now? 105.16. For the purposes of this act, where notices issued under subsection 2 to the owner, and the provisions apply to the owner, and he is being deemed. Is that it? Is it? The provision that applies to the owner at the time. Yes. I have not, as the owner, committed an offense. I have not. But you're saying, look here, all right, here is a carrot. If you pay the fine,
Speaker's time has expired.
Sufficient time to complete.
it's in deference to seniority and not necessarily at large. The speaker's time having expired, might the speaker be allowed enough time to complete his presentation?
The question is that the speaker's time be extended to allow him to complete his presentation. In favor?
Aye.
Against?
I'm grateful to the leader of government business, and the reference to seniority always tickles me. Tickles me. To the colleagues, I shan't abuse. Yeah. So how do you deem a blind person to be the driver of a motor vehicle? That's what it says. And how do you deem? Do you deem an unlicensed driver to be the driver? So maybe, as Senator Sinclair said, I'm not understanding the legislation. Maybe, or but that bothers me a little bit.
There's a problem.
I don't want to overstate the case, but when you look at clause 110 and you see, well, start at 109. The authority may, with the approval of the minister, make regulations for the governance and administration of the authority. Now, the authority has an important role to play. So from day one, we need to know what are the powers going to be. Then when you look at 110, that is where now it becomes frightening. Really frightening.
Excellent point.
It is scary. 110 goes from A to Z, Y to Z. Then it starts AA, so 26 gone, 26 more coming. Let me tell you, what it means is that the minister is going to have immense power, immense powers. And I know I'm not quarreling about the powers that he will have. What I am quarreling about is the non-exercise. Because what should have happened with all these powers, creating as they do the unknown, it is impossible to studiously study this bill and make the kind of presentation that is expected of every senator. It's not possible, because the powers are plenipotentiary. Let's deal with one. At page 85, subclause A, B. He's going to make regulations concerning the electronic monitoring and surveillance of vehicles, the electronic detection and recording of offenses committed against this act, and the method of charging for such offense. So I want to know, for example, when you are going to visit me with the responsibility to pay for the wrong committed by the driver. If I don't pay, what happens? What happens? Suppose I sell the car. Suppose I sell the car before it needs to be relicensed. So in other words, I think I need to know what the minister is going to do. I need to know. The testing, sealing, maintenance, and use of traffic offense detection devices, including the approval by the authority of persons to test, seal, maintain, or use traffic offense detection devices. You need to be specific as to what is going to happen. What is it that is going to be proposed? Because these regulations will be subject to affirmative resolution. So we'll have a chance to see them. But we are seeing them after the fact, unless it is that the bill, having provided for its coming into being on an appointed day, that a day will not be appointed until the regulations have been passed, or that anything in the bill which depends on regulations cannot be passed, cannot be brought into being until the regulations, because there may be clauses now and sections later which can be brought into being without the regulations. There will be. So I need to know. Let me look. I have a note. I want to end because I don't want to. Oh, this was just by way of example. 34(1)(b). Subject to the authority may suspend a permit or driver's license if B, the holder is in breach of any provision of this act or the regulations. No, that's a serious thing. I'd like to know what will be the legislative basis for the suspension of the license. I don't know. Can't guess. Won't guess. And shouldn't guess. So, let me look at 32(5). Yeah, it is just to amplify a point. 32(5) deals with the retesting. And I'm saying that you can retest, but still the person is not, a proper road user. So, right, okay. No, you see, the retesting, simply means he's going to the depot. And the depot says, yes, he can park. Yes, you understand? He can reverse. Now, I had some notes here. Yeah, I covered that. And as I said, I don't want to. Unlike the member quoted by the learned senator, the member downstairs quoted, I don't agree with all of the provisions in this. bill. And I don't agree that this bill should be passed, the amendments, without the regulations. I don't agree.
Well said.
I have to underscore this point. The police must enforce the overwhelming majority, and I'm not saying this from any political platform. It is from genuine belief, having regard to past experience. The police force is comprised overwhelmingly of honest, decent, law-abiding, conscientious members. But like in the political directorate, there are some rogues. There are some rogues. And my point is, get rid of the rogues in the political arena. And for the commissioner, please, commissioner, try to get rid of the rogues. Because if you don't get rid of the rogues, you are consistently going to hear that we have a corrupt police force. And those who have the authority, get rid of the political rogues, thieves. Because what happens is that we all get painted with the same brush. And the society will never, ever reach its highest goals if policymakers are rogues, corrupt, thieves.
I am ready to we're ready to hang our head in shame, all of us collectively.
Mr. President?
This report,
No, I'm okay. Mr. President, I also rise to make...
Well, Mr. Skeffrey.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr. President.
Skeffrey.
Rise to make an intervention in the debate here with the amendments to this Road Traffic Act. And there are we are selling this issue about discipline or indisciplined drivers on the road. And let me first say, we on this side, we support discipline in every shape and form in the society, also among motorists. But if we start to analyze the problem from the wrong standpoint, they will not be able to solve the problem. Let me state categorically that the police has no issue or difficulty in issuing tickets. We currently have a ticketing system where you are caught face to face and you are given your tickets. You see them every day in the towns, on the highways and the byways, and they stop you for speeding, poor parking. I was at another meeting this week with the Commissioner of Police, and he's reinforced that point that so far this year, over 400,000 tickets have been issued to motorists. So it's not a police problem. Because the duty of the police is to issue the tickets. Now the real issue is after you issue the ticket, what next? So a systemic problem with the court system and the tax office. Now if you can have a system where one driver gets over 700 tickets, another one, recently both of them accumulated 1,500 tickets. So the police did their job in issuing from ticket number 1 to 700. For that particular one, the underpaid police, men and women. So it's no longer a police issue. No, how, as a state apparatus, we could allow one driver, for example, or two, and there are many other examples out there, to have that large number of tickets, despite an amnesty that we had 1, 2, 3 times. And those persons are still out there driving. So to say we're going to use a ticket system to curb indiscipline is a false premise. Very, very false premise, and there's no evidence to support that. Secondly, now, so we're going to move now because we have an administrative problem, not a legislative problem. And the law is already there. But because we are weak as a state to solve the problem, what do? Have another law. And hoping that the problem will be solved. So we're not going to have surveillance cameras. And let me say to Senator Sinclair, we on this side not opposed to technology to improve our state apparatus. Absolutely. We support technology and we have integrated technology many times. But you talk about discipline again. And that owners must take responsibility for their drivers. Where is a system that I can go to and get a record if I want to employ a driver to drive any vehicle for me? If you get that, so let's say the system is there. I go and I want to employ John Brown. And they say, Mr. Skeffrey, John Brown record is clean. As of the 1st of December, no ticket. I employ John Brown. Now John Brown runs that red light, gets that, he's not caught. Now I am at my home.
Charles is the employer.
No ticket comes to me. Then when I eventually get the data, I fire John Brown. Because I say, boy, John Brown, you're in discipline. Why did you run the red light? What John Brown will do? Go to Senator Brown. No, I will have to pay. But Senator John Brown, who is not known to Senator Brown, and go to Senator Brown and say, I want to drive a taxi. Senator Brown goes to the same tax office. John Brown record is clean.
Thank you.
But John Brown is the one that ran the red light and I had to fire him because I believe in discipline. So what you are now doing is to transfer an indisciplined John Brown all around Jamaica to drive for other persons. So there is no evidence to support the discipline argument. That won't solve it. So John Brown will be employed by Senator Brown.
Do the same thing.
And commissar act. Get caught by the camera of the vehicle, not John Brown. So so in this context, John Brown will never be caught by the police face to face to get that ticket. Breaks the stoplight and everything. The surveillance camera captures the vehicle because it is the vehicle that commits the offense now and not John Brown. So we are now circulating an indisciplined John Brown in the society who started with a clean record.
Notwithstanding class 6.
So we need to understand that we have to think it through somewhat. And I don't want people to keep on telling me it happens elsewhere. That jurisdiction. When we're going to implement law, we can't cut and paste and say it happens elsewhere. Because there are many laws we have, many clauses in laws we have now that is not working. That we just cut and paste. We have to take our context and our culture and reality into consideration when you go to make laws. What methodology will be used to notify the owner of the vehicle? We don't know because there's no regulation. And the minister in her opening remarks said, for example, text, put it in writing so we can assess the thing properly. We understand the adjusting system of our communities and the poor, the inefficient postal service that we have. There are many persons, Senator Gill, when are your workers? If they're relying on the postal service to get the light bill and water rate, you'd have cut off every month. Because sometimes you get the one for January, March, April. We know that's the reality. Well, I live in rural Jamaica. So they say I'm from Cross Keys, PO, everywhere. And the postal agencies, them closed down. Let us understand that. So let us find time to develop the legislation properly. We are imposing a law, calling on the Senate to pass a law today that we don't even work out the mechanism as yet. Is that fair? Yeah. And let me go back to clause 1 here, clause 20, that we're asking us to amend. And when Senator Sinclair speak about colleagues in the lower house, I am passionate, I respect my colleagues. Yeah. And we have certain principles that abide us from the same political party. But when I put on my clothes and for man to come here, I come here as Senator Wentworth Skeffrey on behalf of the Jamaican people. Not on behalf of the People's National Party. There are certain issues as a party we'll have principal position on. And we work together. But when I come here, and let us understand, we don't come here to support. No, let us understand. That I think some of us don't understand our rules. And I'm serious about that. When we come to the Senate, we don't come to defend a policy or an idea. The policy might be good. The concept might be great. What we come to do is to look at it line by line, paragraph by paragraph, clause by clause. So you can have the best idea, the best concept, but if it's not properly worded, it equals zero, which is nothing. So our job. I remember the Integrity Commission bill when Senator Brown pointed out a weakness in a particular clause. And we said this policy had to go back down there. And he was right. This one in class 20, we said, why you so strident on people must have the license? Senator Sinclair said, no, people must be disciplined. Argument about one trousers this week and today and one tomorrow. And when Senator Brown spoke about the poor lady might leave her handbag or change, I would say, no, it's a feminist argument.
Whoa, remember that.
Today we are coming back with that thing. Had we done our job right as a review chamber from day one, not JLP, PNP government opposition, but 21 of us reviewing what is happening down in the law house to get better laws for our people. Absolutely. So we are all in support of the Road Traffic Act. So don't shift the debate as if we started it. We are for greater discipline on our roads, not just among taximen, but we want the law when it is passed is not appear to be oppressive against any one group comparing to the others. That's all we are asking. We are not yet ready today to pass clause 105 because government is sure what it will be. Even clause 20 or such other document constituting evidence. What does that mean?
And the minister said ID can use.
No, but what does it mean? Other such documents. No, this is a critical provision that you have to have the regulation. And then I accept there are some laws you can pass and regulation can follow. But this is not even the act, the bill, or the act when it's so passed. That will guide it operation. But the regulations. So we need to understand that as we move forward, Mr. President. Now, so we need to get we talk about technology, fix the current system. Using the technology before we try to create more tickets. Because what you're gonna do, you might have one motorist or an owner now having 700 tickets and don't pay. Like how we have one driver. So you're just creating a problem and problems. Fix the system, use the technology to integrate. Because what you don't have now currently is an integration between the police, the court system, and the tax office. They don't know what each other are doing. And the Minister of Justice himself said it, that the police are afraid to issue warrants. Not because they don't have them, but they're not sure if the tickets have been paid. The Minister of Justice said that. So let us have a system, and in this 21st century, with these young, bright persons who understand technology, where you can integrate the three critical sectors. So as a person pay his or her ticket, the court system will know, the police will know. Solve that first. Capture those who, so as a man get one ticket, him can't get two. And you will have the law enforced. And people will know, say, okay, we are serious. But all you're going to have to do in this law is just to create another set of people now, the owners, who will not be properly notified. Some will not know that that the offense was created, that there's a ticket in my name. So on Christmas Day, I might be going to a Christmas dinner with my beautiful wife. Pull over, and then they carry me to the station, because there's a warrant house for me. Because I have some tickets that I did not pay. Because I don't know.
Never reach cross keys.
So we have to work out the mechanism before we just pass laws. We are here to think. Laws by itself don't solve problems. That's right. 3/4 of the problems why laws don't work is a weak administrative system or a weak management system. And this ticket system is a clear example. If one man can have 700, is a clear example. And this is what is given to him, face to face, 700 times by the police. And you know, make him more disciplined in getting the tickets. So the argument about the Road Traffic Act, which I support, but each time a life is lost on the road is one that should not happen. So we support it. But don't PR it in a situation that we don't understand the cultural reality. It won't get us where we need to go. Because if you don't analyze the problem properly, the solution you are seeking to implement will not work, Mr. President. It can't. And I urge caution. We have, generally speaking, take out these 6 amendments, relatively good bill. That went to the lower house, came to us, 200 amendments. 292. These will not be effective until we have the regulation. It can't, it won't. Don't fool ourselves. Move with this and we control the house. Your government can always work out mechanism with this. Right? Because you're talking about this. Because these 6 makes no sense now. And that we are saying. So let us understand. The other issue is not just about taxi drivers. Unfortunately, it appears as if each time we pass a bill for road traffic is for the taxi drivers. Yeah. But we need to understand that when you use the surveillance cameras, you talk about consultation the other day. We delayed the bill for 2 weeks. Did you consult with the Car Rental Association, for example? No. Did you consult? There are many persons. There are not you personally speaking to them. Talking about proper consultation. You have situations where persons use their vehicles to deliver goods to hotels, markets, commercial activities, suppliers. Did we consult them? No. So many of these persons are aware of the provision probably for the first time, the 2 weeks when we are going to postpone it. So, Mr. President, we need, and we talk about public education. I'm not going to come to that. We always, so the minister said, we're going to have it now because we're reacting to the outcry by some motorists. But it's time we understand the importance of consultation and public education. Right. To be proactive, inform the citizens as to what is coming so you can get their input too. Even if in an informal way, because we don't pass laws for the 21 of us, or the 63 downstairs. At all times, Mr. President, as I close, let us ensure that moral authority is a critical prerequisite for any legislative process. Senator Brown raised down, some people want to downplay it. You have to have that as you move forward. The motorists, the taximen, everyone have to have confidence in a government that what the government will do is in the best interest of the citizen, so they have the moral authority to make laws, to talk about discipline, sacrifice, because they are leading from the front. Unfortunately, the Jamaican people don't get that now as we speak today. So while we on the side support discipline, and don't shift the debate in that context. While we on this side support technology, and don't shift the debate in that context. What we support is a good legislative process in a comprehensive way to lead the transformation that we really want to happen among our motorists, so those driving public, pedestrian, all of us can be safer on the roads and reduce as many deaths on our road and accidents as best as possible. So we support the concept, but these amendments as proposed here, we have some difficulties with it as we proceed. Thank you, Mr. President, and hope that the government side will have moral authority to listen to us as we seek to have the best law for the people.
Thank you very much, Senator Scaffery. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, just to deal briefly with some of the matters raised on the other side before we enter into committee. And of course, to start by thanking colleagues on both sides for their contributions to the debate. I think, and then Senator Morris would be the person ticketed for the offense. and presuming, of course, that this is an offense detected electronically. And he proposed that this is not fair. And I want to suggest to you, Senator Morris, through the chairman, through the president, that if your driver was the responsible person of high character which you sound that you have assured or ensured that he is, then when you get the ticket and you say, Mr. X, I was away at this time I got this ticket. Did you run a red light? That he will say yes. And you will determine whether it is in your interest at that point to say, well, Mr. X, I'm going to warn you this time, but if this happens again, I'm going to have to take it out of your salary, and to change your arrangements, or to say, boy, Mr. X, I think this was absolutely irresponsible, and I think that you need to learn to respect the road code. You know that you could have endangered the life of a child or an elderly person or any other user of the road by breaking a red light, so I'm going to have to ask you to reimburse me for this ticket which I have to pay. The point is that owners and drivers now are a part of the cycle of accountability. And whether it is Grace Kennedy Company Limited with a fleet of 120 truck drivers changing their contracts to say how they treat with tickets and breaches of the law, or an individual senator with a driver or MP with whom they have to ensure that they have clear arrangements, the law is now, the law when we pass this act and when the regulations come into operation will be that certain prescribed offenses, when detected by electronic means, will be ticketed to the owner. This is not a new concept because it already resides in section 105.10, which we already passed, which is in respect of certain parking offenses, which can allow a constable to leave a ticket on a vehicle, and it's ticketed to the owner based on the license and registration. The only difference that we're doing now is ensuring that the bill provides for, in addition to the regulations that will be promulgated or that are being promulgated, for electronic means, for offenses detected by electronic means to be enforced as against the owner. The owners must now take responsibility for what happens in the use of their cars. Section 69, which Senator Knight already alluded to, already provides for the responsibility of the owner to know the identity, know the license and qualifications of their drivers, and it is to work in tandem with this context. So you would be able to contact the person to say, listen, you had the car at X point in time, so I have gotten ticketed for this, so you need to pay me back for this, or you have kept a deposit in order to ensure if you have a commercial arrangement with them. In respect of the responsibility to tell the police who the people are, this is because we are retaining the ability of the constable to issue a ticket personally as well. So if you issue the ticket, and what is wrong with a citizen helping the owner being responsible to share the information with the police if they come, and that he shall continue so to do. So there's no inconsistency between 69 and 105 is what I'm pointing out to you. I want to also just raise the point about the delay in the bill which has been taking place, and to say that certainly there has been some delay because of checking the number of amendments, making sure that they have been properly recorded, and also when tabled in the lower house that the opposition in that place had requested that they be given time to go through them as well, and that had given some time. It was not a week, it was more than that. But just to say that this is a bill which has been long in coming.
Mr. President,
this is a bill which has crossed administrations.
Point of order.
Sorry.
The opposition in the other place asked for a week. A week only. It came the other week. And I really think the minister must not mislead the Senate and the country.
What's the point of order?
That she's misleading when she blamed the opposition in the House for the delay.
Blaming anybody. I never heard her
Listen,
blaming
if
anybody.
I have been
Minister,
misinformed,
just continue, please.
Sure, but if I've been misinformed, I withdraw it. But certainly, it's not an issue. It's not an issue. The point is, it's a bill that has been coming for some time. The bill has crossed administrations. It has crossed sessions because of the intense work that has been done to make sure that we get it right. Research has been done about how these types of provisions were implemented overseas and how we need to adapt them and use them here. This was not done lightly, and it has not been done in a rush. It has been done in an appropriate way, and the idea is one that, of course, crosses administrations, as was pointed out by Senator Sinclair. In respect of the bad driving and the driving classes, so I just want to point out that in addition to 32.5, which deals with suspension and retesting, 36.5 also speaks to the requirement of the court, the ability of the court to require that in order to remove an endorsement of a disqualification from a license, that the court may require not only retesting but recertification through regulated driving schools. And the regulations provides for the regulation of driving schools, which is something that will come. So, in respect of where we are agreed, I know that I want to agree with Senator Knight, where he spoke to the police having the moral courage to say no where they are offered bribes. I want to join him in that call. It's an important call because it is, of course, the few rogues who give those honest, hardworking policemen and women a bad name. But I want to also say that the Commissioner is making great effort to ensure that this issue of corruption is treated with. And also that the Public Safety and Traffic Branch, that branch, Traffic Enforcement Branch, is also persons who have been vetted and in whom we're placing great force to ensure that this act is properly implemented. There was training done before their implementation. There is retraining being done in respect of this act, and it's one of the reasons that we are actually taking that 3-month period to not only finalize the regulations with consultation, which will, Senator Morris, include persons living with disabilities, and it will include other stakeholders. I want to assure you that discussions have continued with the Road Safety Council, who also continues to do their part in sharing the consultative work with stakeholders. But fundamentally, in respect of the system, fixing the system and recognizing that the laws that we pass in here generally, not just this law, but every law, that they will not be worth the paper that they are printed on if they are not enforced. We recognize that, and that's why the work has been taking place in parallel. That is why there is the synchronizing and interoperability of the systems being implemented in respect of the current system. So before you even start electronic detection, the system in respect of paper ticketing is being fixed and will be fixed, and that offences committed under the old Act will be preserved and will be carried through, prosecuted under, in accordance with the clause, I believe it's 135, that saves those offences and makes sure that they are treated appropriately when they come through. So when the system is put in place, that allows us to connect the perpetrators and the system, the ticketing system, the courts and enforcement, as well as a system of recognizing that when you come to renew your certificate of fitness and your registration or your motor vehicle license, depending on the timing and the phase. Remember, motor vehicle is now 5 years, but your certificate of fitness and your license registration is every year. If you haven't done it, at a 6-monthly payment. So those at those junctures, you come face to face with the issue of tickets and the issue of fines that are outstanding. Again, no demerit points accrue to owners, and what happens is a fiscal issue where you continue to incur late fees. But we feel confident. We feel confident that the approach that's being taken here has been rigorous, it has been robust, it has perhaps taken us too long, but it is going to get us to the right place where discipline and law and order will reign on our streets, and that will percolate into the broader society. And with those few words, Mr. President, I ask for the second reading of the bill. I ask for the amendments to be approved.
Okay. What is before this Honourable Senate is a motion that the amendments of the House of Representatives to the bill entitled An Act to Repeal and Replace the Road Traffic Act to establish the Island Traffic Authority as the authority for the regulation and control of traffic on the roads, to improve road safety and transport efficiency, and to reduce the cost of administering road transport, to create a new category of driver's license, and for connected matters. The motion is that these amendments be considered and approved. If 1 minute, once you agree to that motion, then I will put the amendments individually. So the first motion is that we consider the amendments and approve them. Those in favor? Aye. Against? So now, I'm going to now put the proposed amendment to clause number 20. Those in favor?
I have an amendment to put to it. It says now, are such other documents constituting evidence thereof as may be prescribed? And that strikes me that you're talking about a photograph or a photocopy. But the minister, when she opened, said you may have a TRN, and they'll be able to check the TRN through the system. And therefore, what ought to be said here is, instead of other documents constituting evidence thereof, other documents which may help in identifying the existence of the driver's license. That's really what you want.
Thank you, Senator Brown.
And I'm so proposing.
So the question is, the proposal by Senator Brown is to amend the amendment to read or such document which may help in identifying the driver. Those in favor? Against? No. The noes have it. I therefore put clause 20. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it. Clause number 105.
Amendment.
I put the amendment.
Sorry.
Yeah, I put the amendments there too. Senator Brown, you have something to say?
Yes, we have a 2. 2, which now brings in a 16A and B, that we bring in a 16C, that...
Senator Brown, the clerk is just pointing out that we are not in committee, so you should stand we should stand as usual.
So you mean it does come, we can't... Sorry.
Yes.
Innocento. I'm sorry. Yeah. Not in committee. I'm proposing, Mr. President, that we have a 16C in the second amendment. That 16C says that the offense will not be treated as a criminal offense. And I raise this because, yes, we may have vicarious liability, but vicarious liability is limited to the civil environment. And if we're going to argue vicarious liability here, then we should not make somebody being accused of charged for an offense they didn't actually do themselves. That should be civil and not criminal. If you do that, then you make a change that may get support.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Senator Brown is proposing, and he has given you the rationale, therefore, for the addition of a third subsection 16C, which would read in effect that the offense delineated hereunder would not be considered to be a criminal offense. That is the proposal. Those in favor? Against? The noes have it. I therefore put clause 105. Those in favor, the amendments thereto. Those in favor? There is a divide. Madam Clerk.
Ayes or noes? Okay. So, Senator Graham? All right, yes, what are we answering yes to? What's the question we're answering yes? No, he said yes.
That it be approved. That it be approved. That it be approved.
Okay. All right, I'm making sure.
The question is that, I'm sorry, just to be, for the purpose of clarity, specifically for the clerk rather than the members who I know are paying very close attention, the divide relates to the acceptance of the amendment to clause 105. So when Senator Brahma said aye, next.
Okay.
Sir?
No, what you voting for?
No.
We're voting on the clause as is.
No, we're voting on the clause.
As is.
Yes.
Without the amendment.
Look, listen again now. Senator
Them don't know
Brown.
what them doing, Chair, President?
No, it's for the benefit. Aye. It's what Senator Brown's proposal was already voted down. The question is that the amendment to clause 105, and Senator Ransford Brown has already said aye. So let's continue down the list.
Senator Graham? Senator Brown?
No to this wicked clause.
Senator Charles? Senator Crawford? Senator Fraser Binns? Senator Gale? Senator Hill? Senator Johnson Smith? Senator Knight? Senator Longmore? Senator Morris? Senator Morrison? Senator Reid? Senator Samuda? Senator Scott Motley? Senator Sinclair? Senator Skeffrey? Senator Slowly? Senator Webby? Senator Williams? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I do report the divides as follows: 12 ayes, 5 noes, 3 absent. So the ayes have it. I put the amendment to clause 110. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Ayes have it. I put the amendment to the 8th schedule. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Ayes have it. Minister?
Mr. President, thank you very much. I just want to express, because this has been a very long road, so I just want to express most sincere thanks to the technical team within the Ministry of Transport and Mining, within the AG's chambers, within Chief Parliamentary Council, within the Road Safety Council, within the Transport Authority, and indeed just even the members of the public who have been so consistent in their sending of encouraging messages through social media and otherwise to say, pass the bill. It's so important that we change how we operate on our roads. So I want to join the appeal that was made earlier for safe use of our roads during the Christmas season, for us to make sure that if we drink, we don't drive, and if we drive, we don't drink, and to make sure, makes all sense. and sir, that we really take today as a turning point in how it is we treat with these matters. So I want to indicate, Mr. President, that it is not intended to do any further business today and to ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. I thank you.
Minister,
President.
1 minute, please. Minister, may I just inquire, Minister, if you intend to sit between now and... Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Brown. The question is that the Senate be adjourned to the question is that the Senate be adjourned to a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? The Senate now stands adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk.